So, another episode of Real Voices from Happy Valley. Our sort of podcast series about, well, real voices from Happy Valley. This one features Roger O Doherty and his interest in photography and taking pictures of birds and wildlife that developed during the lockdown. You found it interesting, didn't you?
I did, yeah, because this was you at Roger's house in Mytholmroyd. We've both known Roger for over 30 years, I think. And, he used to live in Oldham where we did, and now we all live over here. And he makes these fantastic calendars with pictures of birds in his garden. And they're just lovely.
And as you listen to it, you'll understand how the calendars and the photography have improved over the period we're talking about.
Yes, I remember showing my mum one of the calendars because we got one for ourselves and she just loved it and wanted one for herself and her brother and her cousin. So, there was instantly another 3 sales there. And, and you'll hear Roger talking about them.
And your sister Claire in Saskatchewan, Canada, loved one that you got sent over there for Christmas.
She was saying about the birds in their garden and how they loved looking at them and seeing what different ones there were. So we got Roger to send her one of his calendars, which she was thrilled with.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the calendars have helped raise money for community projects such as food banks and what have you in the Happy Valley that we're talking about. So, Roger O Doherty.
Yes, that's me.
Sitting in your kitchen. Nice kitchen it is too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I've come to have a chat with you about bird photography and calendars you've done for the last, is it 3 years?
Yes, I've done 3 of these calendars now. It started during lockdown, actually. I mean, the first thing I did, as soon as Boris, you've heard of Boris, he announced the lockdown. I'm
trying to forget him now, he's gone.
He announced the lockdown, I think it was about the 23rd of March in 2020, and the first thing I did was I ran out and I bought a load of timber to build a hen house and decided I was going to get some chickens and, bit of a, prepping, would they call that these days?
Yes. An awful lot of people did that or similar responses.
It was very difficult to find chickens. There was a big run on chickens that year.
A chicken run.
But also, I put it, as I was making this hen house, I was putting up pictures on Facebook of the progress of the hen house, and I started to get awful comments from people like, haven't you finished that yet? Anyway.
People who've never made a hen house.
But I had been taking photographs of birds in the garden, but the fact that I was kind of locked down, that I was sat at this table, and you can see I have a camera here on a tripod, and I actually had 2 cameras up.
So we can see, out of your kitchen here, we can see a few sort of ledges, bushes on the right, trees to the left and back of us. So I've got a garden we can sit in the kitchen and look at the bird life as well. So I know how you feel.
Well, it's quite ideal actually because it's sheltered from the wind. Mm-hmm. It's got plenty of places for birds to sort of hide. So if a sparrowhawk or a cat or anything appears, they've got easy escape routes. And I've got bird feeders up, so the birds come to the feeders. But you'll see as well, I've got strategically placed logs and branches, and I've had branches hanging from the clothesline and stuff like this. So there's a strategy in the sense that you start off bird on a feeder and you're very, very pleased with yourself because you've got a nice little robin on a feeder, but it's just a picture of a robin on a feeder. Mm-hmm. And I got to the point where I was thinking, I need at least the pictures to look like a bird in its natural environment or doing something that birds do rather than just eat out of feeders. Mm-hmm. So I was trying. So there's been an evolution in my bird photography over the period, and I think that's reflected in the calendars. But as I say, back to lockdown, I was sat here. I had my cameras on tripods. I'd be reading a book, but essentially believe it or not, some of us observed the rules. Some of us didn't go out and wander around or have parties and things like this. So I could be sat here 8-10 hours in a day doing different things, but always with an eye out the window to the birds. And it surprised me how much was happening in my back garden. And it was interesting how much of it I could capture.
So had you had an interest in birds or bird photography before that?
Well, I had an interest in photography. Mm-hmm. I like cameras, almost more from a techie point of view than an artistic point of view. My first camera, Dave, was around the time we first met, back in Oldham, 30-odd years ago.
80s.
It in the 1980s, and I bought on Oldham Market, on the Wednesday market, I bought an old Zenith camera, the old Zenith SLRs, manual cameras, and I learned my photography on an old manual camera that cost me next to nothing, But every job I've done since had an element of photography in it. Community organisations, you go and you take pictures of the gala and pictures of this meeting and that meeting, and there's a guest speaker with that. So my photography was kind of general rather than focused, But and I had taken pictures of birds before, nice little pictures of robins on bird feeders. But this became much more technical, and because again, there's a boredom factor. There's a boredom when you see that. Well, I've already taken that photograph. Actually, I've taken it 10 times. What's the next stage?
Yeah, and even if they're 10 different birds, it's the same photograph.
Yes, but over a period, I wasn't just learning how to take more interesting pictures of birds and more pictures that illustrated what birds do. I was building up a variety of pictures. But I was also seeing over time the changes in what's coming to my garden. I would see a nuthatch in the autumn, but I would never see it in the spring. I would see siskins one year, and the next year it seems to be all chaffinches, and you start thinking about what's actually happening in your garden and what you can do to sort of encourage a greater diversity of life in your garden.
And does it give you a slightly different or better understanding of the seasons and how seasons change the life that's around you?
It's the seasons and the life, but it's also, once you realise why you're seeing a nuthatch in the autumn and not seeing it in the spring, because what the nuthatch is doing in the autumn is gathering food for the winter and storing it away and building little stashes, just like jays do, stashes of food for the winter that's going to carry it through.
Lots of different types of animals do that, of course, naturally.
But if you've got a brain the size of a lentil and you're trying to remember where you stashed all this
we are talking about the nuthatch now.
we're talking about the nuthatch, God, yes. And this appreciation of what can be done with a brain the size of a lentil really certainly triggers my thinking and appreciation of the life around me. So you become more interested in the birds themselves and not just pretty things on a perch. You start to appreciate the diversity of their skills and their learning and the complexity of their instincts. And also what you learn about birds quite quickly is that they don't do empathy. They have all the characteristics that we would value most in a human being, in that they are industrious, they're loyal to family, they sing beautifully, they display wonderful colours and so on. And within that framework, what we would think of as the illustration of a moral, intelligent human, we have a totally focused, cynical, unempathetic bird that is only focused on its survival and the survival of its future generations.
We've noticed we don't do anything remotely as much as you. We just have bird feeders in the garden. So on a nail, high up on the gatepost. And so we can look out any day and see a line of jays or crows biggest one at the front, smallest one at the back. Below them there will be starlings that are getting the crumbs that drop down to the floor. And then nearby are the smaller birds waiting for something bigger to move out of the way.
Yes, exactly.
If one's at the bird feeder of any sort of species and something slightly greedier or nastier or bigger comes along, it's like, you get off, I'm having that now.
Well, exactly. And some of the levels of aggression are quite terrifying. I mean, the front cover, I don't know if you've seen the front cover of the latest calendar, but it's a green finch, a green finch, which is, to sit in your hand, but it's caught in a posture that looks like a a pterodactyl that's going to eat anything that gets in its way. And now I'm sure there's no emotion in that for the bird, I don't think, but I think it's pure instinct, get out of my bloody way. It's my turn to eat,
Which is fascinating. But, I mean, you mentioned diversity from what you've seen in your garden, and presumably you take notice of as you're going up and down the valley. Can you say something about the diversity of bird life in the valley? What kind of things do we see? What sort of things that people see, even if they don't know what it is they're seeing?
Right, okay. The first thing to say is that the diversity in this country is very poor. Not because there is quite a wide range of species, but often in very, very small numbers and very isolated and small colonies. So our bird life is really in danger. I think in a few years' time, people will be coming home and saying, I saw a jackdaw today. Because we're losing our bird life very, very rapidly. But I haven't counted, but I'm sure there's 50 species of bird that I've recorded in this garden over the past 3-4 years. And as I say, that does change. I was worried. I've shown you the owl box, haven't I? I've shown you the owl box. I mentioned that making the chicken run, the chicken house, but I started making owl boxes as well. And I stuck one up with the help of a neighbour. I got one up in a tree outside there, and it's nice and quite high. And it felt like a whole sort of fruitless enterprise, because have we seen any owls yet? And for the past couple of years, no evidence of owls near my box. But I went out in the garden there about 4 weeks ago, and I looked up at the owl box, and there's a little owl, not a little owl as in a little owl, but a little tawny owl, a young fledgling, just sat on the platform in front of the box, and I was gobsmacked. I was amazed, I'm absolutely thrilled to bits. So now we have a family of owls floating around, and I was very concerned, and Jane, my wife, was very, very concerned that we was going to lose all our little birds, because big birds eat little birds. That's what
they're hiding from. You were just talking before.
But and there did seem to be a dip in what we were seeing in the garden, but that seems to be recovering. So in the past few years, I don't know, I grew up with sparrows. I'm sure everybody our age just remembers the world being full of sparrows.
Yes, I mean, I'm from sort of council estate Overspill in Liverpool, where it was just council estates as far as you could walk, pretty much, until you got out into the countryside, which is now Knowsley Safari Park. Slightly different animals there now than when I was a kid. But yes, I understand we didn't really see anything besides sparrows.
But in the past couple of decades, sparrows have disappeared. But they are making a comeback, which is really nice. So we have sparrows in the garden now, whereas we've been here 11 years. For the first 7 or 8 years here, we would not have seen a sparrow in the garden. Right. So they come back. One of my favourite birds is the siskin, a lovely little yellow bird, little finch. And again, I have a photograph that I took about 5 years ago. I think we had 4 siskins on the feeder together, but I've hardly seen a siskin since. There is a change over the period. But we are very, very fortunate in this valley in that there's no large-scale farming in this area. There's no major spraying of insecticides in this area. There are lots of trees, and the numbers of trees is increasing. We've strong laws around the preservation of trees in this area.
And we have groups like Tree Responsibility.
And we have groups like Tree Responsibility doing wonderful work. So there is a good environment for birds in this valley, but again, like the club mill just down the road there's been swifts nesting in there for the past couple of years, but I've seen no swifts this year. So we're an island of birds like this valley can be. Isn't enough to sustain bird life into the future. We actually need. We shouldn't even be complacent about what we've got here. We've got to value it, and we've got to spread this type of environment to encourage.
It is really important because when you and I were kids and young men, there was a thing called the Ecology Party, which became the Green Party,
yes.
And the common view of most people, including me and possibly yourself, was like, what's a bunch of hippies who are not relevant to anything. But now everything that they were saying then is a lot more central to our sort of discussions. Not necessarily our decision making, unfortunately, but a lot of people more aware of it, but not necessarily more aware of what can be done about it.
Well, quite,
But probably the biggest cultural hero we've had over the last 5 or 10 years, David Attenborough, for example, who most people I know refer to as Uncle David.
Not you then. but
so you say you've done 3.
I've done 3 calendars.
So have they sold well?
Well, let me tell you how we got to it.
Oh, go on.
People who take photographs often make calendars, or they make them for the family, or they make them for friends, and so on. And I've talked about doing a calendar, for years actually, but never get around to do it. But I had this first year of lockdown. I had a good selection of photographs of birds, and Jane said, "Are you going to do this bloody calendar, or aren't you?" And I went to Print Bureau in Hebden Bridge, who are amazing people. And I went in about 2 weeks before Christmas and said, how long would it take to turn around this calendar? And they said, well, if you got the artwork to us in 3 days sort of thing, we might be able to... Anyway, they did a calendar for me, and I got home with it, and Jane said, how many have you ordered? And I said, I've ordered 50. And she thought, what the blazes are we going to do with 50 calendars? And I put something up.
Did you have an answer for that question?
Well, we sold 210 is what we sold, because I had kept going back to Print Bureau for a few more, which is a very expensive way of ordering calendars. If you go in, so a friend had suggested, look, you should sell these for charity, and I did. I probably made about £1,000 in that first year. And most of that went to Todd Food Bank and to some more to other charities. In fact, we covered the cost of the printing that year ourselves, so everything that came in for those calendars went to food banks.
Well done.
The following year, there was an expectation you're going to do another one, so a bit more preparation into it this time.
You sold over 200 in the first year.
I sold 210 in the first year. Sold... about 400 in the second year, and I sold over 450 in the third year. As I say, Todd Food Bank got the bulk of the money the first year. Cornholme Food Bank, which was setting up at the time, got £1,000 from us in the second year, and an organisation called Sorby Bridge Together got another £1,000, and then bits and pieces of money went to different places.
So,
and then this year, most of the money, we give £3,500 to Calder Food Support, and little bits of money to other things as well. So, and there's still because it's surprising. We're into June now, but each year we manage to sell calendars up to about the end of February. You think it's all dead by once you pass Christmas, but we get a few orders. And we've calendars now. Some went to Singapore. few went to Mozambique. In fact, we had repeat orders from Mozambique this year. Different states of America. And of course, needless to say, quite a few peppered around Ireland, you know.
Mm-hmm. And Viv's sister in Saskatoon, in the middle of the Canadian
yes,
prairies.
I've forgotten about that. Yes,
Said, isn't it lovely when hers arrived?
And I know a lot of people buy because it's a charitable project, you know, but I do take pride in making it as professional a project as possible. And I look at the three and I can see how they've developed. You know, the latest one is much better. There's no typos in it, first of all.
It's always an improvement.
I aim not just to produce a picture of a bird and then a calendar underneath. It's almost like the calendar's about the birds and the calendar bit is actually squeezed into a corner. And the biggest complaint I get is that my calendar space isn't big enough to write all my appointments in, you know. So
which is an important part of why people have calendars.
Which is an important part, exactly. But I'm going to give another plug to Print Bureau because they've been so helpful. I mean, the number of times I had to go back to them last year because the artwork wasn't quite right and stuff. So I had quite a learning curve just taking advice from Print Bureau. But when I went to them first, I was explaining that I wanted a quality piece of work and I asked them to, you know, what they could do. And they showed me, he says, well, you must have a look at Kate Lycett's calendar, you know, because she prints there, you know. And I looked at Kate Lycett's calendar and I said, well, that's what I want. If it's good enough for Kate Lycett, it's good enough for me. That's the quality of paper. That's the quality of printing out. And that's what I've aimed for and stuck with. So, Kate, if you're out there, I even bought one of my son one of your pictures.
You've just reminded me from when we were sort of putting ideas together for this podcast series, which I'm not sure if I told you, it's going to be called Real Voices of Happy Valley.
All right. Okay.
We sort of thought, well, we'll alternate to boy, girl, and sort of, Kate's name is in there, although we haven't spoken to you yet, Kate, but we're coming for you.
Well, maybe you should buy one of my calendars now.
I mean, it's great. It's supporting the community, which is what you're all about anyway, with other things you do.
It's what I've always done. I mean, in the sense that I've always been a community activist. And in employment settings, I've always worked in community organisations and stuff. So I do have a strong motivation to contribute to the society I live in, if you like, and to try and change it for the better.
Which, I mean, we've only done a couple of these podcasts, but that is a major theme already. I spoke to a lot of people involved in the Folk Roots Festival recently, and every one of them, whether they were there as a volunteer or whether they were sort of working behind the bar at the Trades Club or people who do the bookings, etc., being part of and putting something back into the community it's a common part of the culture of this valley.
Well, I think it is. But that's not to say I don't enjoy it. It's not penance. It's not sort of, I'm not sort of sackcloth and ashes stuff. I'm sort of nice camera that I love having and doing good stuff with it. Yeah.
Oh, I know what you mean. I used to do sort of quizzes raising funds for various sort of good-ish causes. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll probably do it again.
Let's hope so.
As much because I thoroughly enjoy it as to help raise money for people. Yeah. Because when you're active politically, you're active in your trade union.
I'm a member of Unite Community. I'm political officer of the local branch, Halifax and Calder Valley branch of Unite Community. I've been in Unite. Well, I was in Unite when I was in employment, but I stuck with Unite Community since, and it's a small branch. It's an important branch, but it works closely with Enough is Enough, for instance, and with the Trades Council to sort of, organise pickets and so on to support striking workers recently. So that's a big thing.
And again, support for things like the food banks, etc.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Well, thanks a lot, Roger.
Well, thank you, Dave, for coming around. I think it's your first time in our house.
It is indeed. It's indeed. Yeah. And a very nice cup of coffee you made for me.
Cheers.